Welcome to the University of North Carolina at Greensboro's Master of Science in Athletic Training Education program. I am Aaron Terranova. I am the clinical coordinator for the MSAT, and you are about to become a preceptor. These visual modules are designed to give you the background, knowledge, skills, and even some techniques that you can use to become an efficient and effective preceptor for MSAT students. I will be your guide throughout these modules, and I'll be located in the bottom corner of the YouTube video. Please make sure that you try to check out any external links I post in the bottom of the YouTube pages. These external links may be articles, case studies, other videos, blogs, etc., but they're going to be great supplemental resources to your preceptor training. Feel free to email me at the link below with any comments, questions, or concerns that you may have regarding this training, the MSAT, or really anything in general. Good luck to you and welcome to the MSAT. Welcome back to our continuing preceptor training. We are now in module 4, which is sort of an extension of the module 3. So we're going to talk about maybe some specific teaching strategies that you can employ as a preceptor. So the first thing you want to understand is that we typically teach the way we learn. So if you're a visual learner, you're typically going to teach visually. If you're an auditory learner, you're going to teach auditory, kinesthetic, etc. So just understand that even though you may have learned something one way, your student may not learn it the same way. And I know it's easy to say, well, I learned it by doing this, therefore you should be able to learn it by doing this. Try not to fall into that trap, and just understand that your teaching experiences and how you approach your teaching is going to change with the student. They're coming in with a variety of different backgrounds, knowledge, experience, etc. Some of them may have had 1,000 observation hours, but never with volleyball. And that's the sport that you're covering with them. So their learning curve, just to understand the sport, is going to make your relationship and your teaching with them. You have to be able to take that into consideration. So real briefly, this is called Bloom's taxonomy, and this is very, very basic and superficial. I'm not going to go into in great depth, and I don't even really care if you understand all the different layers, etc. What I do want you to sort of get out of this when you talk about pedagogy and teaching is that you have sort of base knowledge type teaching and learning, and you have higher order type teaching and learning. And a lot of times we get stuck down here in the knowledge and comprehension level, like just basic rote, spit back, regurgitation, question answer, quick fire. We really want to make sure that our students, especially at the clinical area, are getting up here into the evaluation and synthesis, taking knowledge and synthesizing it and critically thinking, appraising, and using it. I'm going to show you an example of it in a minute here. So when we talk about teaching strategies, a lot of you guys are already using these strategies. You probably didn't even know they had names for them, but you have basic modeling, which is you show, student does, coaching, student walking through a skill, and you're coaching them either verbally or hands-on prompts as they go. Scaffolding, you're sort of building a framework or using either questioning or feedback, etc., to get a student to a certain outcome. You use backwards training, which I really like. It's where you already know what the outcome is, and then you make them work their way all the way back to the beginning to see if they can articulate and go way back. Articulation is have them actually speak and explain their thought process, and that forces them to actually use critical thinking. You're going to notice that all these teaching strategies, we kind of start at the bottom of that Bloom's taxonomy, and now we're kind of moving up to that higher order thinking. Reflection, have them actually reflect about what they did what they did well and poorly. They're gonna probably linger on what they did wrong. Don't forget to ask them to reflect what they did right. Positivity can be a very powerful thing. You can actually do simulations, different explorations. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. And peer teaching, especially if you have two students, have them work with each other. It doesn't have to be first year, second year. Two first years, two second years, they can teach each other different skills, actually be very, very impactful. So let's take like a simple knee evaluation and all these different teaching strategies, which again, we're probably already doing. So if you do modeling, you basically just show them, here's how you do a Lockman's, have them do it. Coaching, prompt them. You can either like help them position their hands, you can give them verbal feedback, etc. Scaffolding, think about scaffolding like working from a history all the way to the diagnosis. So kind of reading them with questioning and feedback as they go through an entire evaluation. And then backwards training, the exact opposite. Tell them it's an ACL sprain right off the bat, and they have to work backwards to figure out how they got to an ACL sprain. That's actually really good for reevaluations where you already know what the patient has, but you're doing a reevaluation on them. Articulation, again, have them explain themselves. Reflection, how did they do, both good and bad. exploration or simulation, have them expand it. So if you're doing an evaluation, say, okay, what would be different or how would you modify this if it was on the field, or if it was a football player, or if it was a geriatric or an adolescent? Have them start to really critically think, how do they approach things differently? And then again, teach a classmate. So you can see we can start with very basic knowledge type teaching and really evolve into more sophisticated critical thinking. Again, these are just different strategies. You don't have to use them all, but if you maybe find one or two that you find really works, make sure you are using it in your critical teaching. The next couple slides, we're going to talk about two concepts, which I know we use a lot, but have a little bit of misconception and maybe a little bit of misuse. So the first one is questioning. Questioning, when you're using it, it needs to be planned, sequential, and clearly phrased for the student. You need to take into account where they are academically, their knowledge, etc. And you want the question actually to lead somewhere. I know that a lot of people like to use the why questioning technique. Why doing this? Why doing that? Why doing that? The problem with the why questioning techniques is, one, the research show it doesn't really work as well as we all think it does. And two, if you've ever had the situation, the student gets very frustrated because you keep asking why because you want them to go down a certain path, or you're trying to get them to a certain answer and they're not getting it. And they get frustrated because they're not understanding where you want them to go with it. And that actually becomes an awkward, frustrating situation. So instead of just using why, you really want to make sure that the question you're using, that you have a very clear thought process in mind of how you're going to get them there. I'm going to show you an example of it. So if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, which are listed here in the categories, again, don't really worry about each individual category, but you can see basic questioning. So at the bottom of this would be knowledge, a basic spit back question. What is insulin-dependent diabetes? Okay, that's very basic questioning, but it's still clearly phrased. Go all the way down to the bottom here, when you get to the higher order thinking, what do you consider to be the most important? You can even, then you can put in the why. So what do you consider, and then why? But the why now has context behind it. Make sense? So if you put these two things together and they're opposite each other, so the knowledge category here lines up with this knowledge level here, evaluation lines up with that evaluation to tip. So they're flip-flopped. But you can see the idea here being that you can take a taxonomy, and by the way, Bloom's taxonomy has been expanded many times, and there's different variations, etc. It's very simplistic. I'm going to put a couple links down below so you can even look at more about Bloom's taxonomy. But you can see how you can move different levels and use different levels of the taxonomy with different types of questioning. Now, the second part that I want to talk about and the sort of misuse is feedback. A couple of things about feedback. One, it needs to be clear. Two, it should be given as soon as you can after a skill is performed. And three, it should have both corrective and directive information. Corrective being confirms or corrects the behavior, and then directive being what we can do moving forward. All right. Make sure you're basing your feedback off something you actually saw. Don't assume and don't make things up. Obviously, you want to be able to see so you can actually relate the feedback to a concrete skill or behavior that you observed. Compare it to a given standard. Now, this could be your standard. It could even be a student standard, i.e., you did this very well yesterday. That is the standard. You did not meet that standard. Or your standard could be, I expect this out of an entry-level professional, and that's my standard. I need you to meet that standard. And make sure that the student understands that feedback is going to be given to them with the intent that you want to make them better. A lot of times our feedback sometimes go into, the student feels like they're just giving feedback just to knock you down. Make sure that you understand that your feedback is there because you want them to get better. Now, going back to this first part up here where I said it should be given as soon as you can, we understand that we don't want to embarrass the student or the patient. So if that means you have to wait a little bit and give the feedback after the patient is left, etc., I understand that. But what we don't want to do is wait a week later to give feedback to a skill or feedback to a behavior. So if you look at both questioning and feedback, two things which I'm sure we do a lot of, keep in mind that you don't want to misuse these two very powerful techniques. Make sure your questioning is clearly phrased, it has a purpose, and it has a way you're going to get there. And make sure your feedback has both corrective and directive information. It's given soon after the skill is performed, and it's given with the intent that you want them to get better, not just to crush their spirit. Putting this all together is a concept called the 1 Minute Preceptor, and you can go online and look at a ton of different things about the 1 minute preceptor. I'm going to try to simplify this in about the next 30 seconds. But basically the 1 minute preceptor has 5 components to it. Get a commitment, probe for supporting evidence, teach general rules, reinforce, and then correct errors. You can see looking at these 5 rules that feedback and questioning is embedded within it, but it's the same type of stuff I was talking about. The questioning, when you're doing questioning, especially in this number 2 here, make sure it's clearly phrased and it has a purpose to it. When we talk about feedback down here in 4 and 5, the feedback is both corrective and directive in nature. There's going to be a YouTube video, which I'm going to throw down here in the comments, has a great example. It's only a couple minutes long. It's a great example of how to use the 1 minute preceptor in a real clinical situation. I highly recommend you watch that video, okay? But the 1 minute preceptor is a good way for you to sort of condense your clinical teaching into these 5 easy steps, and the research has shown that this is a very simple, a very efficient, and a very effective way to help with clinical education when you're working with your students. This is the same idea with the 1 minute preceptor. I would recommend you kind of look at this and watch the video. You can see here are the 5 steps. Here are the type of questions or statements, etc. you can get to achieve your objective with the 1 minute preceptor. So again, if you want to pause this and look at this a little bit more, that's fine. But the 1 minute preceptor, fantastic teaching method. Teachable moments, make sure you take advantage of them. They can occur even when you're not expecting them. The one thing about athletic training is we're always kind of on our toes, and we're always being vigilant about things that can happen. Make sure that if even if something is not part of their rotation, that you use as a teachable moment. So if they have a dislocated glenohumeral joint, use it as a teachable moment. They may never see one again in that rotation. The students are here to learn, so make sure you understand that and keep that in mind. They're not a labor force for you. Let them understand that mistakes are okay. They're here to learn and get better. So some of our students can be really hard on themselves. If you remember back to one of the earlier modules, I told you that they're very internally motivated. Well, they tend to be very hard on themselves. So let them know that mistakes are okay. The problem is we don't want to keep making the same mistake over and over again. So they make a mistake, let's use directive feedback to get them to a better place. Just some general tips and hints. Take just a couple minutes at the end of every day and every shift to just kind of decompress and reflect about what they did and make a plan for the next day. It's a good way to sort of put a bow on the end of the day. It gives the student a chance to sort of maybe even reflect a little bit on what they did and what they can do better, etc. Remember, your students are always listening and watching, okay? So they're going to pick up on all your little cues, both physical, verbal, emotional, etc. So just keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to use games in other imaginative ways. Clinical education can be very fun. For me, it was the most fun I had in my athletic training experience. So if you want to think of something unique and inventive, by all means, go ahead. I'm all for that kind of stuff. And be purposeful with your downtime. We all have downtime, especially in the high school or college settings. So be purposeful with it. If you know they're going to go to film for the next 45 minutes, tell your student, hey, when they're at film, we're going to do this, this, and this. We're going to practice taping. We're going to talk about heat notes, whatever it is. But be purposeful with your downtime. Now, a couple last minute things you're going to show. You can just do a really quick Google search like I did for preceptor tips. Preceptors is a term that many health professions use. And you can see you have a ton of different websites talking about how you be a good preceptor, etc. A lot of them come on nursing. That's fine. Nursing's been around a long time, so they have a lot of research on it. So you can see just something like this: tips for teaching in clinics, the 3 Ps and revolving focus, how to be an effective preceptor. I'm not saying you have to go and use all these, but if you are more curious about picking some tips up about how to be a better preceptor, don't be afraid to use the internet and look for some more anecdotal sources. I'll be including a couple resources down below, so feel free to go look at that also. So that was really the end of our sort of educational modules. Module 5 is our last module. There is that quiz at the end of Module 5, so I hope you've been taking notes for the previous modules. But Module 5 is going to be sort of the nuts and bolts and how we run things here at UNCG. So with that being said, enjoy Module 5, and we'll see you there.